Hi, my name is Deborah Whitehead. This is going to be a tape about my family history. My father's Jimmy Ferguson, or Louis Mayo Ferguson is his real name, is talking to us a little bit about our history and our lineage and things that happened years ago. And we think it's very important that we keep it on tape and get everybody to recognize that times were hard and they've made a lot of accomplishments over the years. In this film, he's going to talk about Jesse Daniel, who was my grandfather, Samuel W. Ferguson, who was my great-grandfather, and John Jack Ferguson and his wife, who were my great-great-grandparents. He's also going to talk a little bit about where he lived, the area, what life was like. This is back during the Depression, different times. We jumped around a little bit, but I think you'll be really surprised on the things that he's discussing. I hope you enjoy the film, so sit back and enjoy it. I want you to do this so that we can kind of get some information. Charles sent me a note. I told him that I wrote him an email and said, going to Dad's this weekend, we'll take the pictures. He should know about the picture that I showed you, which you don't. So, also going to see JC and talk to he and Dad about with the movie film, going to get them on the film and ask questions regarding childhood, living, friends, family, etc. Is there anything you'd like for me to ask them? Let me know. And he wrote back, ask your dad about the service, Army time. So where were you in the service? How long were you in? And just some different things about it.
Well, I went in, I think it was about February 45. Went to Fort Sam Houston, went from there to close to Joplin, Missouri. There's a town called Neosho where I took my basic training. I kind of had a choice of either being in the infantry, which I didn't like, the signal corps I didn't like, so I chose the medical corps because that way I'd try to keep some alive instead of killing some.
Right. How was the war at that time? Was it pretty?
That was just over. The main war was over, but still I was drafted. Got through on basic training, and we went from there to Denver, Colorado, at the Fitzsimmons General Hospital, and started in on our almost like basic training up there. I was in the medical corps.
And were you sick at that time? Or did you?
Well, when I got there, we had just come out of bivouac, sleeping in foxholes full of water. It was pretty rough, and I got pneumonia, and I didn't do anything about it, and I got a little more trouble. So they, instead of giving, they didn't have penicillin then. So at that time, they said, well, the best thing for you is 6-month bed rest. But that lasted about 3 days, and I went on about my rat killing. I was actually still in the hospital, but I carried the mail and stuff like that all the time. And the guys that was really down that was in there, well, I helped them a whole lot, you know. On payday, I'd go cash all their checks and bring them all their money back and that kind of stuff.
So you were mostly a gopher?
Yeah, just a gopher.
Then, go ahead.
I stayed in there 6 months and 2 days. And said I was completely well, but they wanted to discharge me on disability. And altogether, I was in there just a little over 10 months. I got out on medical discharge, and after 3 or 4 months of that, I had to go to Waco once in a while to get checked over and I was okay, so they finally decided I was all right. So then Dad claimed I had to go to work.
Okay. So where'd you work? Where'd you start work? Where'd y'all live? Let me guess that.
We lived on the old lake. It belonged to H.H. Caulfield.
The lake was?
Randall Lake.
Okay.
Now there's the ranch all the way around it's called Randall Lake, was at that time Randall Lake Plantation, which belonged to different people. But I worked for H.H. Caulfield some.
Did y'all raise cattle?
Oh yeah, it's a cattle operation.
And what kind? What kind of cattle?
All kind, mostly Brahman.
What was an average day like? What time did you get up? What'd you do first thing? Did y'all milk cows? Did y'all just hay them?
At that time, no. You get up and go to work. You get there just about the time it's getting light enough to see how to go catch your pony or whatever you was going to do, and then you work till sundown or nearly dark, sometimes after dark. But then I worked there a little while, and then I decided I needed to do something different, so we moved back to a different location and worked for another fellow a little while named Hurtenberger.
Was that still in Randall Lake?
That was near Randall Lake, just across the road. And after I worked for him a little while, then I went over to they call it Randall Lake Plantation, and I went to work for Evans and Wortham at that time. And
how many cattle did y'all run, pretty much?
well, at that time they didn't have very many cattle. It was a cotton farm. Raised a few cattle. Of course, I make a lot of hay. They raised a little corn too. I say a little. It was 700-800 acres.
How big was the whole ranch? Was it?
Well, at that time it was about 3,100 acres. And a little while later they bought another 11 or 1,200 acres that joined it on the downriver side, and that made it 4,300, about what it was.
What was the name of the river?
Well, they still called it Randall Lake at that time, and then after a while they called it Evans and Wortham. You know, they got rid of the Randall Lake and just called it Evans and Wortham.
Is that 9 bar? What we know as 9 bar?
That was the beginning of 9 bar, yeah.
And
They wouldn't call that then.
And what was the lake that was there? You're talking about a river?
No, it was just a small lake, probably 7 or 8 acres.
Okay. When you and Sam and all y'all were growing up, tell me about where Grandma lived and Winnie, whenever y'all found out she had polio. And what you can remember of that.
Mom left before I went in service. And Winnie was born while I was in service. And then after that, I don't know, she was probably 2 or 3 years old or so, I think, when she had polio.
And that would make you how old?
I don't know my calculations.
Okay. You used to tell me that you remember your old grandma, what you called old grandma.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about her.
Not my grandmother, I remember her, the grandmother Ferguson, but the other one, in other words, her mother-in-law, Sam Washington's wife. I remember her.
Mm-hmm.
And she was blind at that time.
And how old are you talking here? When she
I
was
don't know. I was from 4 years old, three and a half, 4 years old on until she passed on.
What do you remember most about them? Where they lived and...
Oh, there's a whole lot of things. My grandpa, he raised a lot of bees because he loved bees.
Like honey.
And he'd go out there with that little cattle about this long, and the little male bees come out, they call them drones. One come out, he'd mash him, because they don't work. You get rid of him.
Huh?
So everybody was gone one day. I decided I'd just help him a little bit. I got out there and I mashed a couple, and then I got kind of covered up with bees, and I decided I better move on,
Did you get done?
Oh yeah, quite a few times. I decided I didn't like that job anyway.
Who was the lady that... I remember you saying one time, I want to say it was old grandma had all the horses.
That was my great-grandmother.
Mm-hmm.
That was Sam Washington's mother.
Mm-hmm.
When she was, where his daddy was John Jack. That was John Jack's wife, and they had all the horses in the San Gabriel River bottom up in there. That was the way back there. My dad got one of the last ones, and I remember it. But I was too little then. They let me ride once, just for a little ways, and of course I fell off, bareback, hit on my head. Always land on my head.
Uh-huh.
I think I was top heavy.
Tell me a little bit about when you had to attend the animals in the middle of winter. Was winters usually bad? Were they pretty mild?
At what age were you talking about?
When you were at Randall Lake.
Well, it wasn't fun. That was old black mud, and if it was wet, you didn't take the feed to the cows. You brought the cow to the feed because you couldn't get down there unless you went horseback.
You went by horseback?
Went horseback all the way down to the river, and bring all of the cows out up to the edge of the hill there where you could travel around a little and get the feed put out there and then bring the cattle to it. Because you couldn't go down to the river. That mud would ball up. You'd be a ton of mud on anything you went in.
Did y'all play in the mud a lot?
If we played, we did.
Oh, Lord. Charles wants to know, he wanted to know about the tending to the animals in the winter, and also about digging post holes in the scorching summer.
Well, that's just normal work there. They wasn't to do that. You take the post hole digger, and that's the only way they had was this manual post hole digger, and you just take that thing and go down there and dig holes all day.
Do you remember anything about Sam Ferguson, your grandpa?
Oh yeah, I remember him quite a bit. He was,
Tell me something.
well, after she passed on, then he lived by himself up there, and
Whereabouts she lived?
well, he lived south of Rockdale there at the old home place. See, they had 200 and something acres there that they owned.
Whereabouts? I don't know where the old home place is.
I'll have to go show you one day. Anyway, it was about 7 to 8 miles just south of Rockdale. on the north side of the Yewall Creek. He, you know, he still done a little work then. Of course, he was an old feller, but you got the picture, I think. But I know then he got to where he couldn't wait on himself too much, and he'd come down to the house every day, which he lived, say, in city blocks, to give you an idea on the measurement, but he probably lived 6 blocks or 7 blocks away from our house. And he'd walk down there every day with his cane, have lunch, and he'd sit around a while and go back. And usually Dad would take him a plate up there at night.
Could he read and write?
Mid-X.
What about your...
He was a very smart man, but he just didn't have the schooling to, you know, write, read. In fact, I can't exactly remember it, but my mother's told me a lot of times that be sitting out in the yard because he didn't have air conditioning. It's hot, you know, and he's out in the yard at night. Big moon up there, and he said, you know, said, someday man will go up there, so he'll figure out a way to get up there. And I think they did finally, didn't they?
Yeah, I believe it did. A couple of years ago. What do you remember about Uncle John and Aunt Ida?
Oh, quite a bit. Uncle John, he was a very good cowman, and she was a very good homemaker, and she took care of things around home. The feeding the livestock, all the housework that went on, and the gardening and stuff like that. She done all of that herself. He done cattle trading, and somebody got a cow that they couldn't ever get. Well, they'd tell him about it. He said, well, I'll be over there next week. I'll see what I can do. After a while, he'd come bring them in. And he would rope the cow, and then he would drive the cow on the horse, and he's got the rope on him, and he'd come driving him up there. He couldn't get away. He got him on a rope. He was a very good cowman. He had patience and had some savvy and some sense how to catch them. The old real wild ones nobody else could get, he'd get them. And he'd get a little, we call it a fee now for that, but you know, they paid him so much for that.
I was hoping JC'd be here, but since we know he's in the hospital, I'm going to ask you some things about JC. What do you remember? Why does he spell his last name different? Who changed it that you know of, and why?
I don't know. I think in the old way was like I spell it. But the way that he spelled his, I think, was due to the fact that none of them were real well educated, and then the public officials, either at the courthouse or marriage license or whatever, they didn't know how to spell it either, and they just put down the way they thought it was spelled. There is some that's spelled that way, but I think his is supposed to be like ours.
Do you remember his mom and everything? His mom and dad?
Yeah.
The Cherry side. What do you remember?
I don't remember a whole lot about the Cherry side. I knew of some of them. Of course, I was pretty small, and I knew who this guy was and this one, and one of her brothers. I remember him pretty well.
What was the brother's name that you mentioned?
Jim Cherry.
Jim.
No, that's wrong. That's wrong.
That's wrong?
That was a see, there was some kin folks there, the G family. They was kin to the G.
G.
Uh-huh. And Jim G was the one I remembered. I said it was her brother, but that was wrong. Because she was Cherry.
What was the hardest thing to you growing up? What was the hardest thing for you to grasp growing up?
Keep my tummy full was one thing during the Depression.
So what was the Depression like for you?
Well, no one had money. You could go work for this guy a couple of days or so. He might pay you with a pig or 4 chickens or something like this, or maybe he would have some potatoes that he had raised and he'd give you a sack of potatoes.
Basically the barter system.
No one had any money to hire anyone because there was no money in circulation.
Right. That's pretty good. It worked though.
Well, they got by. Most important thing was the garden, because without that, they wouldn't have made it.
So y'all had a garden?
Everybody had a garden. You just lived out of the garden. You buy flour and sugar and coffee and tobacco products. Then the rest of it come out of the garden or out of you got milk, butter, raise your own hog and have your bacon. Without that, you see, if the Depression hit now, back then, these people that had moved away from the farm and went to the city, they starved out in the city. They come back to mom and dad on the farm and plant a garden where they could make a living. If that happens today, there is no little farmers left hardly for the people to come back to where they could survive. So I don't know, it'll be kind of tough, I think.
Yeah, there's still people, I believe, that do some of the barter system. Not so much in the United States, but in other countries, that's basically the way they live. Sometimes you wish, that the Americans would take heed of that, I think.
Well, it's just that times change, and there's a lot more people than there used to be, and there's a lot more good jobs in the big cities, and the farming industry has advanced so far till we used to make a whole round to do 1 row. And now then they do 8 rows at a time with a big tractor. And they can't make a living now,
How did you make your rows? By hand, or did you have a horse and plow?
Well, you had a plow with a mule or a horse, one of the two. We had both. I was running one of those walking planters, planting peas when I was 4 years old.
Were you connected to the horse? I mean, with the rope over your shoulder?
Rope go from the horseback and put it around your shoulder. And I couldn't handle the horse, the mule or whatever, but I could hold the planter up. And when I got to the other end, Dad, he would say, "Whoa!" My horse stopped. He'd tap his a little, and he'd turn his team around, and then he'd come turn mine around, and he'd say, "Okay, let's go. Everybody go." Well, my horse followed his, got the other end, and done it again.
That's pretty cool.
And I don't know.
Well, you did a lot of things with your daddy. Y'all hunted a lot too, didn't y'all?
Yeah, quite a bit.
Y'all hunted
He did.
to
I
find
went with him.
Tell me about the squirrels down the river bottom. Y'all hunting squirrels.
Well, that was I guess, a sport and a means of food,
Mhm.
That was kind of a luxury.
Mhm.
Lived off of the land more so.
Yeah. Back then, I guess you had to pretty much live off the land, and whatever you raised,
Whatever you raised, that's what you had to eat.
Mhm. Did y'all have any games that y'all used to play when y'all were kids?
Oh yeah, there's a lot of games. Play ball. Mama pig.
What?
Mama pig.
Mom pig.
Mama.
Oh, mumble pig. Mumble pig. How you play that?
Well, you take your pocket knife and you open one blade straight out and the other down, and you flip it up this way and see if it's sticking the ground over there.
Oh, okay. That's an interesting game. A little dangerous, wasn't it?
No.
What was some other games y'all played?
Oh, it just had to make your own toys back then. Made a little iron thing about this big that come on the wagon hub. That's the center part of the wagon wheel.
Mm-hmm.
This little band held all of the parts together.
Mm-hmm.
The wooden parts to make the hub that the spokes went in. You get one of those little things, and you take a little stick, or a little piece of board if you find it.
Mm-hmm.
Get a Prince Albert tobacco can and mash it flat and bend the sides up, and then you push that little wheel. You just start it rolling, boy. You could just go scooting with that thing and run all over the country pushing that wheel.
Did y'all have any place y'all went swimming, or you climbed trees, or
Wherever there was water.
wherever there was water?
Yeah.
Did y'all go skinny dipping?
I didn't know what a swimming suit was till I was about 25.
Oh, okay.
So we didn't swim where there was any ladies, so we just, well, I wasn't quite that old, I don't think, but
when y'all planted, when you were a little boy, did you ever get in trouble climbing trees?
yeah, I stayed in trouble.
Did you climb trees?
Yeah.
Tell me about it.
Well, I don't know, there's a lot of trouble. I climbed up in one tree. Got way up there pretty high. I was real little though then. I climbed up that tree. They were, I think, picking cotton or something. But anyway, I decided I'd go up that tree, and I got all the way nearly to the top, and then that top branch, last one going straight up, it finally bent over this way, and I was hanging on. So I hollered for Dan. Here he come hollering, hold on. Heck, I wasn't about to let go. He come up there and got me by the foot. We had to unclimb the tree.
Oh, that's pretty nice. Did you call your daddy Daddy, or did you call him Dan?
Well, I called him Dan, that's what everybody else called him. Dan and Mary.
What did he call you?
Oh, Jimmy most of the time. Kind of a nickname that got started.
Did you help your dad one time soak wagon time?
Yeah, that's a bad experience there.
Well, tell me about it. Tell me what y'all did.
Well, they go down to the little water hole head down there, and they call it the tank.
Mm-hmm.
The old wagon wheels would get dried out and they'd just fall apart.
You had to soak.
So you go back down there and you back this wagon out in the water and let it soak. Soak this wood, and you leave it down there all day, and probably on Thursday and then Friday, well then maybe Saturday, pull that booger out, go to town in the wagon, then you wouldn't have any trouble with your wheels being dried out. But he'd back the wagon out there, and then he could, I think, how they did that, they call it the breast choke.
Mm-hmm.
It would just slip off the end of this wagon tongue because it was kind of out at an angle.
Mm-hmm.
He done hooked the team back here standing on the wagon tongue, and then he'd just drive the team out. Well, that thing would fall down. And he would walk that wagon tongue from here out onto the bank, you see. And of course he'd walk back up this wagon tongue. I think he could walk on a rope. But I started out there where he was, but I didn't make it. I fell off. I kind of bear hugged that wagon tongue, and
Did you go under?
it was just above the water. And I got under that thing and I couldn't get up. I made a lot of bubbles. He finally pulled me out. Then I found out the water wasn't but a foot deep. Just stood up.
Oops.
Anyway, that's a bad experience there.
Did you have a toy wagon?
Yep.
What'd you use it for?
Oh, supposed to haul wood in it when I got it, but had little iron wheels, and in that sand you couldn't pull it. So I didn't get a whole lot of good out of that wagon.
What about this pecan? Or beans? Beans. What about the beans?
Oh, that was. I parked that brand new wagon right under the window where I sit on the bench, you know, when we eat for the table. And I look out the window there. We didn't have screens either then, you see, you know what. Well, we knew what screen wire was, but we didn't have any. So I keep tabs on this wagon. Dad, he saw me watching this thing, you know, and he had a big plate of beans there, and he's doggone, I got a rock in my bean. He just dumped it out this window right in my new wagon. Well, man, gosh.
Did you get mad?
Pretty hot.
Did you let him know about it?
Yeah, it's like anybody that knows.
What'd you tell him?
I don't remember now, but I fussed about it. I had to clean my wagon out. Boy, that was something.
Mm-hmm. What was your first car like?
My first car?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the first car I remember having was about this long. It was made out of cast iron. About that long. The wheel would turn. That was a good car. I couldn't tear it up.
Now, your first car that you drove, how old were you when you the first time you drove
A car?
a car, like a Model A?
I was about 8.
8?
Yep. I started at 8 driving that Model T Ford that he had gotten a little bit later in life. And I've been driving ever since. I haven't needed a seat belt yet.
Yeah.
They
Okay.
say you got to buckle up, but I haven't needed one yet, so I buckle up every time I get in there if I can think of it.
That's good. Let's go back. What was Sam like when he was little? Was he a pill?
No, he wasn't too bad. He was a daddy's boy. He didn't talk till he was probably 4 years old before he ever started talking. But I think I had pretty bad lingo before he was born because they said I really did cuss bad. When he come along, I had to quit that so he didn't learn all them bad words. But he had his own language that he'd say this for something and everybody knew what it was, but it wasn't really a word. He wanted to drink water and he'd say, "Dad." And he'd get up and give him a drink.
Dad, what?
He'd go, just suck into it. Well, they knew what it was. He didn't pay much attention to it.
How much school did you go have? And what was your school like? Can you remember any teachers especially, or?
I remember my first teacher was Miss Louise somebody. I don't know, I had to walk for about a half a day to get there.
Let me guess, no shoes.
Mm-hmm.
No shoes, barefooted uphill in the
I
snow.
don't know. Oh, it was uphill both ways.
Both ways.
Yeah.
Oh.
I think it's about 3.5 miles to where we live, by cutting through the woods and cow trails. You could cut across, and then you get down there a certain way. You cut across somebody's plowed field to come out over yonder. Instead of going way down to the corner and then over here and back over here and down yonder, you cut across. Make it short as you could.
Did you walk?
That's the only way we had to go. At that time, when I was going to school. Of course, before I started school, we had the old horse, you know, and they both got sick.
The horses?
Down. My mom and daddy both got sick down. They got out there and they put me on that horse and give me a note and told me to go just like I went to school, you know, only it was farther on. Come to this store. I can remember riding up to that store on the little horse. Of course, I had a burlap sack. Give that guy the note. He brought out whatever they bought, put it in that sack, and tied it on there, and I went back home, horseback.
How old were you?
I don't know, I was probably 5 then, I don't know what it was. But I knew where that school was because we had been over there in a wagon or something prior to that. I hadn't been to that store before that, but you know, they told me it's just straight on down the road from that school.
What were the stores like back then compared to what they are now?
No comparison.
No comparison. Didn't
Well,
have
the little country stores, and they sell a few basic necessities you had to have. No one had a car back then. At that time, when I went to the store that time, there's probably a few in the country, but it was all horseback or on wagons.
Do tell me about JD.
Well, JD was older than me, and I can't remember a whole lot about him, only he'd come down every once in a while, you know, pretty often. He had a swing out there, and he was very muscular. And he'd take that, just a rope swing, you know, and tie it around a limb and come down here and put a board across here and go back and tie the limb. He'd just catch those 2 ropes and he'd just go up that rope like this with his arms only. He was
strong.
He was very strong. Of course, him and JC had grown up climbing grapevines all their young life. Of course, I think JD, he fell out a few times out of the top of a tree somewhere.
That sounds like y'all had a good time.
Well,
let's go back to Sam, Fort Washington, and tell me what he looked like. What were some of his characteristics?
Sam Washington? Well, he always wore his hair long, mustache.
Like a small mustache or a handlebar or what?
It was kind of in between. You didn't let it get too long. He was just, you know, basically an old man, and of course play around with us a little bit. But he done gotten pretty old, and I guess little kids like that was aggravating pretty bad, so.
Do you have to milk cows?
Oh, yeah. If you wanted milk, you did.
You didn't, in other words, you didn't go to the grocery store and buy milk. You went.
Oh, no, that come along way later after I was quite a bit older, that you could go to the store and get milk. Because everybody had their own cow. Now, in the cities, you could buy milk. It would come in glass bottles, you know. But we had our own milk, own hogs and chickens.
Do you have any mean animals that would get you? Like geese? Or anything
No,
like that?
not them, no.
No geese, huh? Let's see. Your Sam Washington's wife's name. What was her name again?
Elizabeth.
Elizabeth. And you said she was blind.
Mm-hmm.
Was she always blind as far as you knew?
Well, as far as from my time on, she was blind, but that didn't stop her.
Mm-hmm.
They lived in the house, and then about probably 30 feet between the house, there was another building made out of logs, which had a tin roof on it, and a shed on the south side, which was kind of the blacksmith shop, but that building was the kitchen. On the other end of the same building, there was another shed room, that was the smokehouse where they kept all of the meat that they raised. And she'd come out of the house, go down the step, go out there, build a fire in that wooden cook stove, and cook a good meal. And she was blind.
Did she do sewing or anything like that?
Not then, she was blind, she could sew.
Did JC's mama sew?
Very much, and very good.
Was she blind?
No,
I always thought she was
no,
blind.
no,
No.
no, she, if I had $1 for every mile of thread she crocheted up,
Be rich, huh? Oh, goodness.
you know, she made quilts and made her own clothes. She didn't want to go to town at all.
Did she sew for other people?
I would think so, yeah, as good as she was. But she would tell Johnny, that was Casey's dad, what kind of material she wanted and how much. What color thread, what size. And he wrote it on. She didn't go to town.
She didn't.
She would go once a year.
Huh. She just didn't like to go to town? She didn't like people, huh?
Well, she liked people, but she didn't want to go to town.
No.
Because it's 7 miles in the wagon. It'd take all day long to go to town and do a little shopping and then get back home dark.
And you still had our chores to do. Tell me about your house when you were a kid. What do you remember about your house? Did you have your own bedrooms, or was it basically one big?
At what age house? I mean, what age? When I was
Probably when you were like 10, around the age of 10. If you can remember that.
at 10 years old, we had a 2-bedroom house then, and just right after that, I know when I was 11, we lived at a different place, and I think it was 3 bedrooms.
So you actually had bedrooms. What were your beds made out of? Your mattresses? Were they
Regular cotton mattresses.
cotton? Tell me about picking cotton. Did you pick cotton?
Just what I had to. I didn't like that job either. Hot,
How'd they pick cotton? I mean, did they carry sacks or?
Oh yeah, you got a great long sack dragging behind you. You pick cotton and put it in that sack, get it full after seemed like a month. Of course, it was half a day. Go up there and then weigh it and then pour it all out. You got to start over again. That seemed like a waste of time to me. You fill it up. That's when I was a little fella though.
Well, that's good. What?
There's a whole lot of things happening in between.
Well.
When I was 10 years old, me and Daddy cut cordwood so I could eat. I wasn't in school. I should have been, but I wasn't in school. I was on the other end of the cross-cut saw. We cut cordwood.
Y'all did that for a living to make money?
That's the only thing you could find to do to make money. There was very little money in circulation up to that point.
Was that back during the Depression?
Right after the Depression. It was, and he finally got a job working for a fellow that he'd go down there and he would dig up trees with a shovel and an axe, and they would just cut them down and cut them up into wood. And he got $1 a day for that. That was our income then, was this $1 a day plus the garden. Then we, after that, we moved on up. Had a Model T Ford, and we loaded that little pickup thing down with a few clothes and a few groceries and a little something, or a tarp or something, make a tent out of it. We went up in the black land, pick cotton in the fall, camp under a tree, pick cotton. Make a little money that way.
What did y'all eat? I mean,
anything you can get.
But did y'all kill like squirrels and cook those and?
Yeah, well, I remember back then they had come out with pork and beans. And that seemed to be a pretty important commodity back then.
Everybody had pork and beans.
Yeah. That was kind of uptown living then. Because, you know, if you're picking cotton and you got to work from real early till real late, and you don't have time to cook much unless it's in the dark on a campfire under a tree. But we made it.
Pretty tough living. You getting tired? We can stop this. We got some really good footage here. Some excellent footage.
I don't know that. There's a whole lot happened in between them times, but.
Well. Okay. Hey, it's going. We already have an hour. Okay, tell us a little bit about Sam when he was born.
Oh well, I don't know that. I know I went and spent the night with the neighbors. We had neighbors up there, had a little boy about the same age as I was, and I went up there and spent the night with him. Come back home the next day and there was a baby there, you know, little brother. And I know my daddy was sitting there by the bedside and he was playing the fiddle. And I remember it just as clear as a bell.
I don't know. Your daddy played the fiddle.
Oh yeah, he played the fiddle. he said, I want this fiddle to go to the youngest son of every generation. Someday it will be worth many, many dollars. And so that, Sam was the youngest, so he got it. Now, I guess now then Charles has it, and then
Charles gives it to Christopher.
if Christopher's the last one, it'll be down to him. But anyway, he was a mighty little feller.
Was he, did y'all ever have any type of, like, big, diseases or anything like that?
Well, I think we had all of them.
All of them meaning?
Where we lived was right off of this Yaywalk Creek bottom, and mosquitoes. There were pretty good ones down there. You could hear them coming in pretty good ways. And malaria was pretty bad. In fact, I found out later that J.C. and his mom and daddy lived across the road from where we lived, but that was a little bit before my time, I think. And they finally give up and moved out of that country on account of the malaria and the mosquitoes. But I had to tough it out. And of course, the neighbors, they had a little girl. I think she was about 4 years old. She had the itch. Back then, as people, you know, in different families would get the itch.
What's the itch?
I guess it probably is a fungus of some kind, but I know it was itchy. That little girl come down there, and she played with Sam's feet. And he was just a little thing, you know, but pretty quick, he got the itch. Then I got it. Golly. Well, the remedies back then were, I guess they worked, but they wasn't as pleasant as they are now. But you'd take this old yellow powdered sulfur, and you mix that up with hog lard, and it just make a paste out of it and just cover you up. And then they put those long johns on you, put you to bed. That way that sulfur would kill this fungus, I guess.
Did it burn?
Well, it wasn't as bad as the itch.
Well, it doesn't sound real pleasant. But it stunk too.
Yeah, it didn't smell very good either. But it worked. We lived over it. I guess that's the first bad thing Sam ever had.
It was the itch.
It was the itch. Got later on, I think he had measles or something, but he was up about 7 then. You know, then they give him a good stout toddy to make those measles break out.
What's toddy?
Well, that's a little whiskey and a little water, and you know, give him a pretty good little shot there. And then Sam, he kind of liked that. So he went and made him one of his own. Gosh, he was about 7 years old. Next thing, he was up on the head of the bed. He was diving out in the middle of the bed. He was having a good time. He wasn't sick. Of course, I got that too after he had them. I had them. He said, "Be sure don't get wet." Well, I didn't think that was anything to that, so I went swimming. It didn't kill me, I guess it's called. We had some.
You had didn't you have a snake bite one time? Didn't you get bit by a snake?
Oh yeah, we had been over to my Uncle John, he died us. Coming home at night, you had to walk, you know. I stepped right on one of them copperheads. Left about, well, it was, you know, they got fangs, so he left 2 marks here, and then there was one. I guess he bit at me twice, maybe, but he got me pretty good. Dad, he carried me on the way from there on toward home. We stopped by the neighbors, and oh, that's probably 8 o'clock. That old fella had already gone to bed. He got up and lit the lantern. We got out on the back porch, and I think the remedy then was to, wherever this snake bite was, you cut an X there and let it bleed out, you know, try to wash the poison out. And he got that old straight razor, you know, about that long. He got out there and he rode and I said, "Where you at him, Dan?" You know, he was fixing to cut, you know. Dad, he said, "Well, let me have it. I can see it right here." So he made a little X in there. They poured some kerosene oil on it and they wrapped it up with a piece of a sheet that they tore off. That was the end of my medication for that. I went on home then.
Did you get sick?
Very, very sick. And legs swelled up, you know, about getting big for 3 or 4 days.
Yeah, you used to tell me stuff about when you would sneak out and chew tobacco.
Well, that was JC's daddy. He chewed this brown mule, you know, real dark color, strong old stuff.
Uh-huh.
Boy, he'd cut off a little bite of that, put in his mouth. He'd chew and spit, talk. And I thought that sure looked like that's good. Well, him and Dad, when they first got our Model T, they went to town. Of course, he bought him some tobacco, but he left it in that old car, that old Model T. Man, I got me a plug of that. I cut off a little hunk, and it didn't taste like I thought it would. It's kind of hot, you know. I chewed, and I swallowed. Boy, that burned. I chewed some more and swallowed again. And in fact, them trees started going around this way.
You turned green?
I don't know. I sure was. I say I had an upset stomach. All those trees just go round and around.
Used to, a lot of people would make their own wine and their White Lightning. Did your daddy ever do any of that?
Oh, everybody did. They couldn't buy it, so they make it. I was a little fella, I went down there and prowling around. Of course, you wouldn't about to let a 4-year-old kid go off in the woods by himself nowadays. That's just unheard of. But I roamed all over the country. I knew where I was. I was raised up that way. I was way back down there one time. I found a bunch of this copper tubing going round this way, you know. I said, "I'll be dang, I wonder what that is, you know." So I went on home. I don't know how. I didn't say anything about it. But I went back down there and the next day I went to look some more. It was gone. Evidently Dad was watching me when I found this thing, and he knew I had found it, so he just moved.
So did you ever drink wine or anything? Or White Lightning?
Well, I was already up about 13 then. I think they call it 4 Roses, and I think they called it a quart. You know, now they call it fifth, I think, but we called it a quart. It's a pretty big bottle. I know it's 49 cents. And that's lasted me up to now. I don't need no more.
Got a little sick, huh?
That's the best 50 cents I ever, 49 cents. That's the best 49 cents I ever spent.
Why?
It's lasted me to now. And I think it'll last from now on. I don't.
You don't want any part of that, huh? Oh, Lord. Was there anything that you'd like to talk about specifically?
Well, my brain works pretty slow, but there's a whole lot to be told yet.
Mm-hmm.
I have to have the question before I can answer them.
Yeah. I'll have to stop and think of some questions.
I can lay awake at night and think of all these things that happened back then. And
Yeah.
it's, I guess,
Oh. Yeah, you used to trap quite a bit. Was that for sport or was that for food or?
oh,
Tell me a little bit about
no, you trap and catch animals and you skin them and you sell the hide. They trap for everything.
that. Did you ever catch any bobcats or anything big?
Oh, yeah, well, the first thing I caught was my mama. But,
How did you get her?
well, see, I went with Dad and he was very smart about this stuff. He said if an animal is coming along here, whatever you're trapping for, you see how long his steps are. Well, then you put a stick back here for him to step over. That will adjust his step to where he'll step right in the trap. So I measured where my mama stepped.
So you figured he was all
When she come off of the doorstep, she's going to step right here. So I put the trap there and I got her. She got me.
Get you a stick? What'd your mama whip
I
you
think it
with?
was a limb. She got a whole, some kind of.
What kind of dog did you have? I remember seeing a lot of pictures of the dog. What was the dog's name?
Rondo. Pretty good dog, right? A couple of dogs. That one, we go in that dog now. You got to remember now, I'm about 4 years old. We go down there where they cleared off the fence row. A lot of brush piles there, and I go down there and I'd stomp on these brush piles, and out would go a rabbit. That dog after him, well, he'd run him. Most of the time there was a certain tree over there, he'd go over there, and that rabbit would go in this hole in this tree, and it was hollow, and he'd go up in there. And I get me a stick, I stick up in there, and I start twisting it, like this. Catch the hair, and then you get the hide, and you twist it real good, and then you just pull him right back out of there. Get him with a leg. That'd be a rabbit. I don't know what we done with them, but we just kill them, I guess, and the dog eat them. Anyway, that was a big sport.
What about skunks? Were skunks pretty bad back then?
Well, I don't know if you call them pretty bad or not. That's another thing I caught. Boy.
Well, now they use tomato soup or tomato, what is it, juice to clean you up. What'd y'all clean up with?
Well, you just wear it out, I think. Take about a week to finally go away.
Did your mama make you undress out of the fence?
Oh, yeah. But that was a different one. I didn't catch that one in a trap. That was one that me and the dog dug up. I thought I don't know what he was digging for, but it was pretty sandy soil, and I found out that I could get me 2 sticks about this long, and I could dig this dirt up as fast as that dog. So I'd dig a while, and he'd dig a while. And he'd dig, and he'd smell down there, and he'd dig some more. I was down there helping him. Finally, he kind of lunged forward and come out of there, and he had a skunk. And of course, he caught him right in the middle and started shaking him, and the south end was pointed towards me. And I want to tell you,
Pretty bad.
It gets in your eyes, it burns, and it gets on your clothes. I went to the house. Mama sent me way back down yonder with a, no, I don't know, it was probably, seemed like a long way, but it was probably 75 yards from the house. Go back down there and shed your clothes and hang them on the fence. Then you come to the house.
So you had to go home naked.
Yep.
Did you have to take a bath?
Yeah, but it didn't do no good.
What kind of soap did you have?
Huh?
What kind of soap did y'all have?
Oh, most of the time homemade soap, lye soap.
Lye soap? And,
Of course, buy some good smelling soap, you know, for Mom to use. If you're going to go somewhere, you use this good soap. It will kind of smell a little bit better, but during the week, well, you just use that old lye soap.
who made lye soap? Did y'all buy it or did y'all?
Make it.
Y'all made it.
Make it.
Yeah. What about the women? Did they have like permanents or?
Oh, yeah. Give herself a permanent, or most of the time. Her hair was real kinky and real frizzy. Of course, her hair was curly anyway, but she'd pin it all up and come out there just real frizzy. And one time she was sitting there at the sewing machine sewing. It was pretty close to the bed. I was sitting over there on the bed, you know, and fooling around, and I looked like it was awful fuzzy, so I had a match. I struck that match on that bedstead, and I stuck it up there, and it just went boom. And all of that blame knocking you never seen to get that hair put out. Boy.
You're in trouble again.
I was in trouble again, and I want you to know I got a tanning in.
What'd you get a tan with? Switch
Oh,
or?
just whatever's available, you know. It wasn't funny then. Guess it's funny now, but
What color's Grandma's hair? What color was her hair when she was younger?
well, she had brown hair, kind of darker colored hair.
What do you remember about Grandma's side of the family? Do you remember anything about her parents
I
or
remember a whole lot.
about them?
Oh, my grandpa Johnson, he's the one who learned me to cuss when I was little, you see. He'd give me a nickel every time I cussed real big.
That's a lot of money.
And that was pretty good, something. He thought that was really funny. And I got pretty good at it, I guess, because,
Till Sam come along, huh?
yeah, and I had to quit all of that. Oh, I remember a lot about them.
They live close to you?
No, they lived pretty good ways. Well, now it'd be about a 15-minute drive in the car, or maybe less. But then, to get in the wagon, you had to go to town 8 miles, and that's pretty slow mode of transportation. Then we catch the train. We ride 8 miles down to the next town and get off the train, get in another wagon, and go from there about 5 miles to my grandpa's house. Well, that's pretty well an all-day trip. But we made it. Of course, he farmed. That was his main occupation, was farming. Of course, he lived back in the woods, and he used to hire people and cut cordwood, loaded on box cars, freight cars, and ship it a lot of places. You know, they made money that way. And down there they had no fences. It was land, but they didn't really know who it belonged to, and it was just open country. And he'd buy a lot of hogs in the fall of the year, and keep them. They just roam in the woods, wherever they want to go, they just go. Of course, he kept up with them and had them marked so we know who's who.
How do they keep mark? How do they put a mark on them?
Well, they usually put notches in their ears or something like that. Because every different people, they had different marks. Some in the left ear, some in the right ear. They had a way to keep up with it.
Mm-hmm.
Some in the top of the ear, some in the bottom. But he raised quite a few hogs, and then they'd get up fat on those acorns that was just out there. Well, then you tell them, make money. Raise a little cotton, corn, peanuts, a lot of hogs. And of course they had milk cows. They
What-
made it all right.
What town would that be now? Where
Well,
they
it's
live?
between Milano and Goss on Highway 79 on the north side of the road. It was about, it was pretty good ways back off of the highway, just a little wagon road down there to it. The way the wagon rode is probably a mile. I think he rented the land back there from somebody else. He farmed it, and
Like sharecropping?
no, I don't think he done sharecropping, I think he just paid so much a year for the land and he worked it because he was there a lot of years.
What was she like?
Well, she was a small, petite lady, real black eyes, and worked the horns off of a billy goat.
And what was her name?
Betsy. She done a lot of work. She was little. She could just go and go and go and go.
Oh, tell me something about how when you were in the service, you got a medal for marksman, I believe.
Expert
Expert.
rifleman.
Tell me a little bit about how y'all learned to shoot, or what.
I already knew how.
Well, I know that.
But,
How many?
well, you get, after we went so far through training, well, then we got over to the rifle part. And we had a rifle range, and of course you shoot 200 yards with open sights. They go practice, they practice and practice and practice. Well, I didn't get to practice. I had KP, I had to work in the kitchen, a couple of days, so I missed some practice. Then we got over there, and I think in that battalion there was 1,700 men in that battalion.
Do you remember what battalion was? What
No,
the name
I
of it?
forgot it as quick as I could when I got out of there. But anyway, I had the highest score in 1,700. I got an expert rifleman medal for that, which they try to turn into some big deal. You had to march over here and parade around, go this way a while and this way a while, and turn and stop, and all this military stuff. And then they come over and pin this medal on you with a big hullabaloo or something. I don't know.
How long was there a specific stride that you had to do when you marched?
Yeah, I was supposed to step 30 inches, but I don't think some of them could quite reach that far. So I had to take a little shorter ones, Then if they ever, that's when you're really marching. But when you go out just on a hike or something, they turn me loose then. I could kind of stretch it out, Their tongue would be hanging out when we got back, because I was used to that. I was raised up walking. That's the only way I had to go. That was fun to me.
Well, in all your 71 years of wisdom, what is the one thing in your life that stands out? And if you could do anything to make it, to change it, your life, what would it have been?
Ooh, I'd changed quite a few things. I guess the most important thing was when I got baptized and got my ticket to the big house up yonder. I think that's the most important thing I ever got done. The rest of it didn't really amount to much.
And when did you get baptized?
Hmm?
When were you baptized?
I don't know. 69. I think 69.
Do you remember what preacher baptized
Yeah.
you?
Reverend Bob Craig.
It was out at Shallow, right? Shallow Baptist Church. Yeah.
Rest of it didn't amount to much, I don't think.
Who took you to church the first time?
Oh, my Uncle Z.T. Johnson. I was probably 8. First time I went to church. I didn't know what they'd done. I heard my mama talk about when they went to church. She sang in the choir, you know. But I never did know anything about that. So my Uncle Z.T., of course, we had to walk this 4 miles now to get there. Maybe a little bit farther than that. But see, walking, you cut through the country on a straighter line than you do if you got the wagon and team. You got to go down this way. But anyway, he took me to church my first time, and then I don't know. It probably was a year later. I remember when he got baptized, and somebody had a brand new tank down there, and pretty water, you know. They was out there dunking a bunch of them.
Did they baptize in the river?
Well, wherever they had water.
Wherever they had water?
You know, if somebody had a pretty clean tank, they'd get over there, or they'd go to the river. They got more modern now. Of course, I got more modern. I got in one of these here aquarium-looking things, you know. Where I guess water's water, though. It was up on the stage, you know, where the preacher stood up there, and it had that thing up there full of water. It wasn't very deep. It was deep on him, so he was a little short guy. But anyway, I got all the way under.
I think they had a little problem getting you back up, though, because you were so tall.
No. Well, he might have thought he had a problem. I heard one fellow say one time he got baptized. He was one of these motorcycle riders. He said he got baptized several times because he wasn't used to a whole lot of water. You know, they kind of nasty anyway. I said that felt good.
You said Grandma went to church. What church did she go to? What denomination?
Baptist.
Baptist.
Yeah. Anyway, that's one of the more important things. The rest of it is, I guess, just existing and have fun if you can.
They got to talk to one of your buddies from when you were in the Army, or when you were in the service. How much did you remember about him?
A whole lot.
You did?
I didn't know him very long, but I know he was a very good fellow. And we was in basic training together. Seemed like he really did like me because during the time I was in this hospital for 6 months. Well, he was still taking his training, and he come to visit me a lot of times during this 6-month period. Then I got out, come home, and never did hear from him anymore till I heard at a later date that he had gotten killed in a car wreck. But then he called me today, and he's still around. That was his cousin that got killed in the car wreck. So we kind of chewed the fat a while. He ain't got more than 10 miles from where he was, where he come from in the service back there. He lived right out of Edinburgh.
What do you, you've recently retired after, how many years did you work for ranching for 9 Bar? And, total. And what do you think of retirement?
Well, I hadn't missed the ranching yet.
How many years did you work for a ranch?
Well, I started with them, I think, in 47, in the fall of 47. And then I worked on until they put me managing the ranch over there north of Waller. And then after a while they sold that, and me along with it, and I stayed there then and worked for Mr. Lynch about another 10 years. And his wife died, and everybody lost interest in the ranch, and so he wanted to get out of the cow business, and so I worked out a deal to sell all of the cows, all of the equipment back to 9 Bar Ranch, because the cows were 9 bars to start with, and I had a whole lot of pretty sorry old cows, but I built them up. In the 12 years I was there, till we had one of the pretty well recognized over the country, because I exported a lot of cattle to Venezuela and Brazil and places, you know, that export stuff. If they come from Brazil up here to buy my cows, I figure they must have been pretty good. Then I come back in and I worked for 9 Bar another 21 years. I was going to retire, but they were getting ready to sell the ranch, and so I told them I would stay on until they sold the thing and get it completed, and then so they finally got it sold, and we had 4 months to do whatever we needed to do, you know, to get moved off of the place or get our own thing. So we bought us a place here in town and moved to town. We really got work to do now. But they was very, very good to us, and I'm very grateful.
Now, what do you think of retirement now?
Oh, it's all right. I think I worked about as hard as I ever did, but it's just doing something different.
Did you ever have any hobbies that you really enjoyed? And I know you've always dabbled in something, but what was one thing that you really like to do as a hobby?
Well, I don't know. I like to fish a whole lot. I like to deer hunt real good. I got into the CB radio one time, and that's worse than being an alcoholic. Because you go hungry to buy a new radio that you don't need in the first place. And I finally got over that. Or maybe I just outgrew it or something, I don't know. But that was, I had a lot of fun out of it. I worked on them an awful lot, repaired a lot of them for other people, and they bring them for 50-mile radius to bring me to fix. I guess 'cause I work cheap.
Most time free, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Well, I charge for the parts and
Yeah.
I fix them at night, something to fiddle with. But I got out of that. I haven't been fishing about 3 or 4 years now, but I'm still hunting little. If I get that red big one, like this, that you have to turn kind of crossways to get through the door, if I can get that one, then I'm going to quit.
Tell me about.
I don't want a little one. They ain't used to kill a little one. I know I can kill a little one. And I don't care anything about the meat. And I sure don't want to have to clean him.
We made a tape last night and talked about some things. Had Dave talk about different things, and he's gonna. Afterwards we sat down and we talked about things that he remembered, and he'd like to discuss a little more on. So the first thing we're going to talk about is Samuel and Elizabeth. He mentioned that Elizabeth was blind, and that was unknown to me, but I think it's an important factor. So if you'd like to just kind of go on about that. How'd she tell different money?
Well, I think first, I don't know how long she has been blind, but when I knew her, she was blind. But they say that on the money exchange, that if you gave her a bill, she felt of it, and she knew what it was. And people would try to trick her, and by the feel of the money, she could tell the value of it. Whether it's a 20 or 5 or 1. I never had a hold of any long enough to feel of it hardly.
Okay, and something else we talked about a little bit was how Elizabeth, since she was blind, and if she ever needed Samuel, how did she contact him when he was out in the pasture?
Right outside of the house, between the house and the kitchen, which are 2 separate buildings, 2 trees with, I don't know if it was a rope or chain or what, between the 2 trees, and they had a big old plow or a big sweep hanging up out there, and she hit that with a piece of iron, and it was like a bell, only a lot better. You could hear that thing for miles. She'd go out there and bang on that plow. Well, wherever he was, then it was not the noise problem we have today. He could hear that thing anywhere he would be around on the place.
Let's go to what Samuel looked like, and was there any distinct features about him?
Well, he was about 6 feet tall, and I'd say 180, or he might have been a little heavier than that when he was a little younger, but I've heard people say he was very well proportioned, for his size. One thing that stands out, I've heard my daddy say a lot of times they had a big piece of railroad iron that they used in the farming. Grandpa, he could put that thing on his shoulder and carry it from one location to the next without ever stopping. My daddy said he tried it a lot of times, he never could make it. He had to stop and rest.
So he's pretty stout.
If he got it on his shoulder, he had it.
Yes. Did Samuel or Elizabeth, do you remember any brothers or sisters, and did you spend any time with them, or
Of who?
Samuel's brothers or sisters?
No, I didn't know any of them.
Okay.
I knew some cousins of some of his brothers' kids that I knew, of Singleton Ferguson.
Did they live?
My daddy and him, they played baseball a lot, I think.
Oh, they played baseball.
Oh yeah, they're pretty good at it.
What did your daddy play? What position?
Oh, I guess all of them. I don't know, but both of them were pitchers, and my daddy, as far as I can ever find out, was never outrun in a foot race. Even JC has lots of medals and set records in Rockdale High School for running, races, foot races. Dad outrun him, so I guess he must have been pretty fast. And my dad, JC was 18, and my dad was probably 50. He outrun him, so.
Pretty fast.
Or according to JC, he did. Said he couldn't outrun him. I couldn't either because I tried it.
Okay, Elizabeth had some brothers and sisters, right?
Yeah.
Did you know any of them?
Well, I knew she was a Holder. I knew Uncle Will Holder. He used to come down pretty often. And he was, I guess, pretty good with kids because he'd get me out there and he'd take his walking cane and he would draw a picture of his real big fancy barn. He'd draw this in the sand with his walking cane. And then he said, here's your little old scrubby barn over here. And I'd get so mad, I guess I was probably 3. And I'd get down there and erase all of it in the sand. And he'd get a kick out of that. And he'd start off on his house or his horse. And his was always big, fancy, and mine was just trash.
You said that you made a comment a little earlier about with their hobbies, and evidently they were baseball to play around with a little bit,
Oh, yeah.
and fishing.
Well, if you had time to go fishing, that's fine, but you usually had to go a pretty good ways, and that takes up a lot of time. So if they had a little bit, they play dominoes or something like this. Play baseball.
Okay. I can't think of any more questions to ask you about Samuel and Elizabeth, other than we talked about their house a little bit. Can you go back and talk about their house and what it looked like and how big it was, and how many rooms was in it, and if they used a cook stove or that type of stuff?
Oh, the house was mainly one had a front porch and one big living room with a fireplace in it. And then they had another little room on the back of that was bedroom. Kind of about 2 beds, and that was it. But the kitchen was a separate building from the house.
And did that serve a certain purpose? I mean, what purpose was having the kitchen away from the house?
Oh, I don't know. I guess
If it called fire.
they called a fire, it wouldn't burn the house down and burn down the kitchen. But it also served as the blacksmith place out. She had room on the front, or I called it the front, and then on the other side was the smokehouse where they kept all of it.
Let's go back to your boyhood, yours and Sam's. And I believe you got dog bit one time. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, I don't know how big it was, but it wasn't very big. I started from Grandpa's house over to this kitchen, and the dog was asleep under the porch, and when I walked by, he jumped up and bit me right in the face. And then they said, you ought to quit messing with that dog. Well, I wasn't messing with him to start with. I just walked by.
Did you get a tan?
He was probably asleep, and I
Startled him.
startled him or something, or I wasn't supposed to be there, little kids. And he nipped me pretty good. Right in my looks.
What was your first word that you knew how to spell?
Remington.
And about
I learned to spell Remington by the time I was 5
how?
because Dad had a picture, a big long picture of a shotgun. It was a Remington. And I learned to spell Remington. That was my first word to spell. I know Sam, his first was pie, P-I-E, pie. He got that down pretty quick.
What was your house like? Describe the size of your house and when you were a little kid.
Well, it wasn't a mansion, but it served the purpose. It was probably a quarter-mile south of where my grandpa lived. There was 2 rooms. Each of them were 12-foot square. So the entire house was 12 by 24. And I remember Dad built a little porch on the back. It didn't have a roof over it, just the porch stuck out there. I know one time I was laying on that porch asleep and I dreamed I was falling. And I fell and I fell and I fell and I couldn't. It seemed like I don't know how far I fell, but like you can imagine people falling out of an airplane, you know. And after a while I hit the ground, go boom. I went to sleep, I rolled off that porch.
Ouch.
But not on my head again.
So the house, what, y'all's beds, what were they made out of? What was the mattress made out of?
Well, just cotton mattresses, like they had up until, I guess they come out with the foam rubber stuff. But
What all was in your house as far as belongings? I mean, did you have a lot of?
Didn't have very much. We had 2 beds in that one room. And they had the sewing machine in there where my mother was sewing when I set her hair on fire, got beat up. And then in the wintertime, the heater went right there also, kind of pretty close to this sewing machine. That's all room there was in that room for that furniture. We could sit down on the bed, and the shotgun, it stayed loaded right behind the door facing. And we was raised up, the shotgun is there and it is loaded. If it's not loaded, you might as well have a stick. You know, and as far as being of any use, but we knew it was loaded and we grew up that way. And now they want you to unload it and lock the shells up on one end of the house and lock up the gun on the other end of the house. Well, I've seen the time my daddy could bounce up to get that shotgun, and these little old hawks would have little chickens. The hawks would come around and catch those chickens. There wasn't many of them got away if he'd see them in time. It was already loaded, so all they had to do was aim and fire, and he got him. But if you'd had a stick there, well, you wouldn't have much profit.
Right. Who were you named after? Your name?
Oh, well, I'm not sure about the Louis part. But my Grandpa Johnson's middle name was Mayo, so I've got that. And then, way back there someplace, there was a Governor, Jim Ferguson, so they nicknamed me Jimmy, and it kind of stuck. I still got it.
What about Sam? Where'd you get his name?
Well, his grandpa named him, I remember that real good. He had that long walking cane. He come walking in the back door and he said, well, I said, how's old Sam Houston Ferguson this morning? And that was his name from then on.
Tell me about your first remembrance of Santa, when Santa Claus came.
Oh, I don't know. We went to visit the neighbors and stayed up there a while, and after a while we come home and they was Santa Claus had come while we was up there to see those kids, and Santa Claus come, and well, we wasn't at home because we was up there, but I didn't get any toys. We come on back home and talking about it on the way, maybe he had stopped there. You know, since we wasn't home, he might have left something anyway, you know, so.
And this was you and your daddy and your
My
mom?
mother, and, that was before Sam, but they talked about the reindeer. Well, let's go down, we might find the tracks down there, so we went to look for the tracks, and we found some tracks there. Oh, that's the reindeer track right there. He sure looked like our calf track to me.
What else did you get?
I don't know, I got maybe an apple and an orange and maybe a little toy or something, not much.
What happened the first time you babysat? Sam, your little baby brother.
What happened?
You tell me about it.
I don't know. You mean the babysitting?
Yeah, the babysitting. First time you had to babysit.
Well, I've done that a lot of time, but one time I got beat up. But you know, in the summertime it's hot in the house, so they'd move the bed outside under the shade tree. And at Sam, he could sit up. And I had to babysit while they went somewhere, and while they were gone, well, he got dirty, and I don't know, it was an awful lot, it seemed to me like. It was a pretty big area here. Well, some guy come walking up from somewhere, or maybe he's in a wagon, I don't know, but anyway, when the mom and them come back, I told them need to hurry up and get over there and clean him up because he was all dirty, you know. That embarrassed her, and so I got beat up. Give me a switching.
A switching. What'd you
No, I
get
don't know if
switched
she
with?
gave me a switching or not, but she paddled me pretty good for embarrassing her in front of that guy.
What about your first Halloween? Did y'all celebrate Halloween or Easter or anything like that?
Oh, we didn't celebrate it much until, I guess, Sam was a year old or so, I guess, about a year and a half maybe. But anyway, JD come down. He lived in Fort Worth. Wanted to take me back home with him. Then it was only just, wasn't very many days then until another holiday, which was Armistice Day or something, that was going to bring me back that holiday. But anyway, we was up there in time for Halloween. We walked from the house, it was, I don't know, 8 or 10 blocks down the street. I'd never seen such a commotion, and all them people covered up with all kind of ugly masks, blowing horns and all kind of stuff. But that was quite a deal for me.
Probably the first time you ever been in a big town.
Oh yeah. And must have been 800 miles up there because I sure got tired.
Did they do fireworks or anything like that?
I don't remember much fireworks, not at the Halloween thing. At Christmas time we have a few little bangs. Have the big old racing bit, we go out there and bore a hole down in a log, and they whittle out a peg then of about this long with a groove on the side. They pour a bunch of powder down in this log, lay that fuse in this little groove, and then drive this thing down in there, and they'd light that fuse and then run like that. Everything.
It'd blow up, wouldn't it?
Well, that peg is no telling how far it went. But it'd blow it out of there, I'm going to tell you. Of course, I had a lot of experience in that even later on when I was a teenager. I had a old hydraulic jack that you could just pull the center out of it. And at that time, you could buy these big firecrackers. I light the firecracker and drop it back down there, and then put that thing back in there on top of it. And that center part was iron. It'd blow that thing way down there in the field, and I'd have to go hunt it. And if you use a stick, you just forget about it, because it was lighter. It just
Uh-huh. Did you ever, nowadays it's tradition for Easter, the Easter egg hunt and that type of stuff. Did y'all do anything like that?
Oh, I think so. They we'd have a little Easter egg hunt up at the neighbor's house. They had more kids, and we'd usually go up there with them. I thought that was something there to find the Easter egg. It was, they didn't make me believe that no rabbit left that egg, though, I'll tell you that. So they looked just like chicken eggs to me.
Okay. We talked a little bit last night, different things, and you said one time there was a lady, you were out taking your bath. Now, how often did y'all take baths?
Whenever you need it. Weekly or semi-weekly. Well, that depends on the water supply.
Uh-huh.
We have to share. Take the big wash tub that you wash clothes in, and you heat up some water and get it there. To keep from making such a big mess, we had a little log building out the back we call the smokehouse. So you put the tub in there, but I guess over the years the door had fell down or something, but I was in there taking my bath in this tub. A neighbor lady, she come down there. Well, she never would come to the front door. She always had to walk around the house and look all down every place else, you know. I was in there taking a bath. Boy, I jumped out of that tub and got behind something there, and she said, "Oh, I seen you." I hated her from that day on.
You remember her name?
Yeah, it was old Lady Hill. That's what they call her, Old Lady Hill.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what her name was.
Let's talk a little bit more about your daddy. He used to have his...
Let me back up a little.
Oh, okay.
I think that lady might have had the same problem as saying, "I seen you," as I do. You know, I say them instead of those, but at my age, it don't make no difference anyway. Who cares?
Right. Uncle Dan had a favorite word that anytime something didn't go right that he always used. What was the word?
No, that was foot.
That was like his cuss word, wasn't it?
Well, maybe not cuss word, but people say, "Oh, heck, I can do so-and-so," and he'd say, "Foot, I can do that."
Tell me about the fishing line with Uncle Dan.
Oh, that was way later in life. That we lived on Little River then. I go over there. We used stink bait. I made stink bait. And you put a sponge on your hook, and you dip the sponge in this stinky stuff, and you go to where the shallow places in the river where the water was moving pretty good, and you fish there. So we do that at night because you got to work all day. I picked him up. We go on stink bait. We went down to a certain place. I knew right where this cow trail was going down to the water, so I grabbed my tackles and rod and reel, and I went in front of the car just a few steps and down that hill. Well, he got out of the car. He was a little bit slower, and he got his stuff, and he started down the riverbank. Well, it happened to be we parked right beside of a Yopon thicket. Well, his flashlight didn't work too good. It blinked on him, and he bang it, get it to go again. And he fought his way down through this thicket, all the way down to the edge of the water. And then he put this rod and reel under his arm when he left the car. And then he he had something in this hand and a flashlight in this one, and trying to get through all of this thicket. If he'd have just come on up there where I went down, it was a good wide place, but he didn't know that. He went through that thicket. Well, when he got down there and got sit down, he found out his hook was hung, and he'd been unreeling the line all this time. So I fished a while. I heard him grumbling up there, you know. Said he'd been on that river for 20-something years. He didn't know there was a thicket like that down here. So he goes back up through that thicket, winding this line back up and trying to figure out where it went with that flashlight. Didn't work very good. After a while, I heard the door slam. Wasn't getting bites anyway, so I went on back up there, and he had just got in the car. And when he put this rod and reel under his arm, the hook had got hung in the upholstery in the car. So he goes all through this thicket down to the water, and then he had to reroute it back up there, winding up his line. He was mad by that time. He didn't want to fish anyway. He was ready to go home.
You said last night that he always had a habit of bringing, when he got a steak or something, he'd bring it in, tell Grandma to fix it. But him and his buddies came home one night. He brought a bunch of buddies or something.
I don't remember that part about the buddies. I know he would go to town, and when he'd come back, he'd bring a big steak. Well, we'd already eaten and gone to bed by the time he got in. Well, she'd get up and cook it for him. He sure could, after he'd had a few beers, he could sure eat a lot of steak.
I remember somebody talking, used to tell me that Grandpa had some, I believe they were baby wolves or baby coyotes. Or
Baby
something
coyotes.
that he raised from pups.
Yeah, I called him, give them to him. He raised those things. They was up grown, and they just stayed around the house there. The house was up on blocks. They stay under the house the most time.
Were they pretty good watchdogs?
They wasn't good for anything, really, would eat. Now they were his companions, and they'd waller on him, and he'd pet them and everything. But a stranger come up, they'd disappear quick. They'd gone.
One thing that has always stood out in my life, watching you over the years, is any animal seems to flock to you. I know when y'all lived out at the ranch, you always had different little animals that would come up and want you to feed them, and you just take care of them and raise them and then let them go. And I think that's real important. I have a lot of pictures of you, like deer and your dove and different things.
Oh, I don't know. I just hipping them out a little, about all. They wind up being that deer business. I don't want to get into that again. Raised that one little deer. I spent $300 on milk. Raised that thing, and they're pretty nasty. They're kind of like a goat. She'd come in the house, and then you got to be careful. She'd jump back out the window, if it's open or not. Wherever there's daylight, they go.
We're kind of getting up to date now, and we talked about the fire ant situation within the state of Texas and different areas. And one time you told me that there was no baby animals anymore, hardly, that were to the ground because of the fire ants were so bad. Now they're pretty much eradicated and they're starting to come back. Tell me a little bit about why you think.
Oh, well, fire ants a pretty tough customer, I tell you. anything that raised on the ground, like quail or rabbits or even rats. Well, the fire ants just eat them. Snakes, they eat them. Frogs, they eat them. I don't know if they eat the snakes or not, but they eat up everything that the snake would live on. And I've gone 12 months out at the ranch without seeing a snake. And I've seen the time that any time that I cross one of those creeks, I carry my BB gun and I could kill 4 or 5. Most any time I drive up one of those low water crossings and stop there, 4 or 5 snakes. And they were just bukus of them. And now then, the fire ants are kind of playing out. They're not a tenth as bad as they were, and begin to see a few rabbits. Begin to find a few frogs. You know, for I guess seemed me like 10 years I didn't see a toad frog. And we got some out here in the yard now. And you see a few rabbits there once in a while, but of course the bird population, they begin to come back a little. I know at the ranch, all the spring, the rooster bird of the bobwhites, he'd set up on the post and holler. Well, you could hear him a long ways. And there was 2 or 3 years that I'd only hear one bird a year in the springtime. That tells me there's very few pairs around. But the last year there was a covey up there pretty close to our house.
So you think that the putting out the fire ant poison and everything that everybody's been doing, I think it's the government or the state of Texas that's been supplying it at very low fee, that's pretty much eradicated them.
It didn't have any effect on our part. I think the fire ants are either moved on or something, but in this area, well, they're not near as bad now. And the other smaller insects are beginning to come back. See, for many years we had army worms. You'd have to spray to kill army worms, so they eat up everything in the country. Well, then we went through a period, there wasn't no army worms, their ants eat them. They like them, I guess.
They're fine with me. I hate worms.
Because if they're down on the ground, that fire ant, he's going to get him. And there's these big red ants, there is none.
So you think
The
that
fire ants eradicated the big red ants. There used to be an awful lot of them. When we first cleared that country, there was a lot of red ants.
I'm talking about 9-bar out here in Newstead.
I'm talking about the last 20 years now.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about the changes in the coyotes that you've noticed.
Oh, not a whole lot of change in the coyotes. I've heard them talk about the wolf part. You read up on this stuff and you see in the magazines and things, the last known wolf was in certain years. And I know that I saw at the ranch, we see coyotes every day somewhere around on the ranch, and we're very familiar with what coyotes are. But there was a bigger animal, twice as big, a dark brown, and they traveled different. And I've heard them holler at night, and there is no comparison to what coyotes, we hear them nearly every night at home. But this other thing, he makes one long, high-pitched, long wail, I don't know. The last one I saw was when JC was with me. We saw him running. He went across the road and down close to the creek.
I think it's like a timber wolf, maybe?
It could have been. I don't know what he was. I don't know what they looked like, but he wasn't a coyote. But it was some kind of a bigger wolf type animal. I called him a wolf. I don't know what.
We talked a little bit about hunting, and this is in later years. What y'all hunt for, and what all have you hunted for in your life? And,
Oh, I don't know. I hunt for squirrels, rabbits, dove, quail, blackbirds. Killed a lot of blackbirds, but we wouldn't hunt for them. They were just there.
you tried to get rid of them because they were
No,
hindrance,
I just
or?
wanted. There was millions of them. And Sam and I were little boys.
The geese population's changed too over the years.
Yeah, they slowed down quite a bit.
You were talking about, last night we talked about a real big bird. You thought maybe it was an eagle, some type of eagle. Talk to me about that. His wingspan and stuff.
He was a huge bird, much bigger than what the eagle's supposed to be. They say 8-foot wingspan or something like that is a very large one. The one I saw was much bigger than that. I'd say at least 12 inch, because not 12 inch, but 12 feet.
His wingspan.
He'd only come around in the wintertime, and I think he lived on those geese. But he stood up at least 3 feet high, just sitting out in the field. And he wouldn't land anywhere except in plowed field hardly.
Think he was trying to eat crops, or?
No, he don't bother the crops. He just, I guess he'd land over there to rest a while. And I know one thing, when he took off and got up in the air, all of the geese left the country. I always wanted to get me one of these little model airplanes, because I used to have to chase those geese to run them out, to keep them from eating up everything you got, all your winter pasture for your cattle. I drive 100 miles a day just chasing geese from one end of the ranch to the other, back and forth. I go to one end, they fly up and go down to the other end light, and I go down there and they go up back to the other end. And there's an awful lot of them. Had to open a lot of gates in between there too.
Then a lot of getting out and getting back in, huh? Talk a little bit about JC. Let's go to JC and talk about his family, what you know about him, or what you've been told, what you remember. JC was like the Texas, what's now called Texas DPS. He was a ranger or something.
Yeah, he was.
Tell me about that.
That was after he got out of college. He got a motorcycle and he was happy then. But they go then. They just ride the roads. They maybe go 100 miles north, 100 miles east, and 100 miles south, and 100 miles west back to where he come from. That was their day's run.
And what was the title that he carried? What was his title? I mean, was it?
I think it was State Highway Patrol then. But they rode with motorcycles, and then after that, a while on motorcycles, they got, I guess, a promotion. They got a car then. That was probably 37, 38, long in there.
Did he carry guns?
Oh,
Did he
yeah.
have a gun?
Yeah, he told me he carried the old 45 automatic. That's what he liked the best to carry. I think you get pretty heavy after a while. Daily exercise.
When JC was born, what did they name him? Or did he?
Well, he said they didn't name him for quite a while. He got checking around to get his birth certificate and found out he was just named Boy Ferguson. So he basically named himself. His mother was a Cherry, so he called himself John Cherry. And then they found out in another thing that he was a John Jr., but I don't know which is, but he goes by John Cherry.
Can't think of too much more.
Must add, in the New Salem school, I don't know how many grades, but I just guessed that they had, what would be like now would be junior high, but I know JC, he rode the horse back and forth to school. And then I've seen him play football up at Rockdale. And I don't know a whole lot about that from there on, but I know he got out of high school and he went on to San Marcos and started school down there in college. And back then, well, I don't know any of the details much, except I knew he was in college. And then after a while he was out and he was on the state highway patrol. And he got promoted, I guess, or something. Anyway, he got off of that motor scooter.
Got him a car?
Got him a car. He said you could be on that motorcycle out anywhere. Little thunder shower come up, you think you're going to outrun it to town. He said, you just, well, forget it, you're going to get wet. You get going about 60 and one of them big yellow grasshoppers getting away, hit you right in the ear, and he said, boy, oh boy.
So evidently they didn't wear helmets
You know,
back then.
they had some kind of headgear, I don't know what it was, but might have been a steel helmet, huh? Like the one we had in the Army.
How many kids did JC have?
He had 2 daughters. The first one named Idella May. And then him and his first wife separated. And later on in life, he married another woman from down East Texas, and they had 1 daughter named Linda. She's now Linda Singletary. Her husband is pretty high up in the school system at Sci-Fair right now.
Do they visit with JC? Does anybody take care of JC? JC's how old now? See, he was born in 19...
Oh, he was born in 1914. He's 84. Be 85 in January.
Does anybody go visit him or take care of him? Or?
Well, he hadn't needed anybody to take care of him. He take care of himself pretty well, but at the present time, he's in the hospital now. He had ulcer problems and pretty bad shape. But he was out here, 3 weeks ago, I think, visited us a little bit. He's getting on in years. still doing, if he can get over this little hump he's on now, to get straightened out with this ulcer business, he'd be all right for a while yet. I want to try to get him to move closer by so I can take care of him. His daughter lives out around New Caney somewhere, and I think she's already got her hands full, so looks like it's kind of up to me to kind of look after him. I'll see that somebody looks after him. If it's not his daughter, then I will.
Yeah, somebody needs to. He's lived a very quiet life, I think. I know we used to see him quite often, and y'all probably still see him, but I think he lived a very quiet life.
Yeah, we caught an awful lot of fish. We used to go to Lake Livingston, Lake Conroe. That's quite a while back though. Get home about 2 o'clock in the morning and have a whole tub full of fish to clean. So hard to get up early the next morning. After you work all day and then you leave late in the afternoon and drive over there and fish till midnight or so, and you come home and then clean the fish.
Right.
Later I learned how to do that a lot more effective. You unhook him and let him slip out of your hand right back in the water. You don't have to clean him.
Tell me, we're going way on ahead now. Whenever us kids were born, James Ray was born at Randall Lake, right?
Yeah, we lived at Randall Lake. He was born in Cameron. In fact, all 4 of the boys were born in the same hospital by the same doctor. One thing that we got a thing somewhere, the hospital bill that I got from his birth, the total hospital bill was $38.
I have mine. I have my hospital bill, and my hospital bill was about that much. So,
I think the doctor bill was $50 and the hospital was $38, so that
can't do that now, can you?
you got to put up $2,000. You don't get in the door.
Right. What have you seen over the years that has changed as far as the medical field? Lots of changes, huh?
Oh, there's been a lot of them. Everything that you used to use for home remedies, they've taken it off the market. Mm-hmm. Even the turpentine. We used to take how the croup so bad, you know, and take a teaspoon with some sugar on it, put about 4 or 5 drops of turpentine, 3 drops of kerosene oil, and you put that sugar in your mouth, and you just suck on that to dissolve all that sugar, and that was your cough syrup, or for your sore throat or stuff like that.
Well, I remember Grandma used to make a poultice to put on us.
Yeah, that was made out of, I don't know what.
Hog lard.
Hog lard was, they used that for everything. And the turpentine, they used that for everything. They make that old stinky stuff, rub it on you, and cover you up with a towel, a hot towel or something, and put you in the bed and cover you up. That'd get you well quicker than all the stuff they got now. So, can run to the doctor every time you get a croup or bad sniffles or something like they do now. You know, just hop in the car and go 40 miles over to the doctor.
Did y'all take vaccinations, different types of shots when you were kids like they do now? Vaccinate?
Very little.
Y'all had polio.
Well, yeah, but I was grown then. That polio come along later, and then they started to get these little cubes of sugar. You know, that was a pretty easy way to get it done. Of course, they had shots for the measles and the chicken pox, and there's all kind of stuff like that. But I didn't get many of those till I got in the Army. And I got enough to make up for what I had missed.
How old were you when your mama left? That you can remember.
Oh, I was probably 14 or 15.
And she left, and you and Sam pretty much made it on your own. You stayed with your daddy, or was
Yeah.
your daddy?
Oh, we stayed with Dad. And there was a time there that work was very scarce. It was pretty rough times back then. We had pretty good times, and then things changed a little, and then it got hard to find work. Not much going on. But a little before she left, we were doing pretty good for a couple of years there. Dad made $1 a day, and I made $1 a day because I got man's wages. You know, the rest of the kids, they get 75 cents.
And how old were you?
Oh, I don't know. I'm probably 13. Had to be cutting cordwood for a living. I don't remember just exactly how old I was when she left, but I was up there somewhere 13, 14.
That's when Winnie was born?
No, I was in the service then. I think she was born in 45 while I was in the service. I think I actually got out of the service in 46, but it was like January or something like that. I don't remember. I didn't want to remember when I got out. That was history. I was gone.
How far did Grandma live from you?
When?
Wait, after she left.
Oh, she went to Houston.
And y'all were still there.
Yeah.
And
Got her a job in a cafe or something there, and she was a cashier or something, I think. I don't know what all kind of work she did.
she, I know when I was little, or still to this day, I can remember Grandma smelling a certain way. Anytime she'd hug you or anything, you could always, I remember that smell. And I found that smell one day, and it was called Evening in Paris.
Yeah.
And I still remember that. Something else I always remember about Grandma is her fingernails were always painted with red. She liked red.
I guess pink was her favorite color.
Oh, really?
She wanted to buy that old pink house over yonder, and I talked her out of that. But she always had a pink dress or something that was pink. She liked pink. I'm surprised she didn't have a pink car.
Let's talk a little bit about your Your first vehicle that you drove, other than a wagon.
Well, that was a Model T Ford. The car, I'd walk from the house up the road to the entrance, past Grandpa's house, on a pretty good way farther to the entrance where they had to stop to come through the gate. Then I would get to drive from there home. Down this little wagon road. Kind of go between these two trees and make a little curve and go between two more.
What year was that?
Oh God, I don't know. I was 8 years old when I started that. Then I'd drive from up there home. Well, that was all the driving, so then I would walk back and look at my tracks to see how good I'd done. All the way back to the gate.
Imagine back then it was a big deal.
And the old car didn't have any lights on it. And Dad would come in about maybe 10 o'clock at night. Hey, you hear him come choo 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 down through them trees. And he never did hit a tree. He could just come down that road in the dark as well as good in the daytime.
Huh. He knew where a tree was. Wasn't he a trapper?
Oh yeah, he was a trapper, but another thing is, see then, anytime you went somewhere, you had to walk most of the time unless you went in that old car and it didn't have any lights, so, but you was used to the dark. I can see better in the dark than most people. They can't see anything. Well, I can see good. You just get out there and wait a little while and get away from the light and wait a little bit, then you can see. Oh, but you're rat killing. What was you going to ask about a while ago?
Trapping. Grandpa Dan used to trap.
Oh yeah, he trapped for everything, and he could catch anything. Just whatever it was he wanted to catch, well, he knew how to do it. Because, well, like the coyotes, they maybe go down the road, well, they'd be in either one of the wagon ruts or the other one. And it was just all sandy road. Well, if he was getting in the right kind of place, he may get where there's a big tree close to the road. He'd put his trap close to this tree, and in that rut, I'm call it a rut. He backed down here and he put a little brush or something to make the coyote fish coming down that side, make him move over and get in the other one where the trap was. And the same thing on the other side. Where he didn't just go build a fence, but he put just enough to make him get over. And that way it wouldn't alarm the animals. And then he knew how far this animal stepped. And he put a small stick. If you put a big one and step on it and step way out on it, he put a small one to make them step over it. And he knew where to put it, and he stepped right in the trap. Wasn't any problem, just figuring out. That my Grandpa Johnson, he trapped some too. I know one time I set a couple of traps, got down there, and the first one I put out, I caught a bobcat, big old bobcat. Well, that bobcat, where I put the trap, there was a hole about so big in this tree, big tree. Well, he just went in that hole, the trap on him, and he was back in there, and I couldn't get him out. So Dad told me, we live pretty close to my Grandpa Johnson, and he told him to go over and tell him about it. So he loaded up a few little items, some more traps, the axe. Here we set out to go get my bobcat. Well, he got on the other side of the tree from that hole, and And the old tree wasn't very thick, you know, just a big hole there, about rotted out anyway, so he cut a big hole in there. Well, that bobcat, he's kind of unhappy, you know, and then so he'd take a steel trap, and he'd set that trap, and he would swing it toward that bobcat, and he'd hit at it like that. Well, he caught that foot. So then he tied it over here. Got him another trap, and he'd swing that, and he hit it with this one, and he had that one caught. So then he had him with 2 traps, so he tied his feet together. And he got all 4 feet tied together. Then he had to worry about him biting you. So he made like a little lasso loop, and he lassoed that rascal, you know, around the neck kind of loosely. And he got a stick, or he cut a little green limb, probably bigger than your thumb, a little bit bigger. He put it down there, and that cat bit that stick. When he did, he pulled this rope. Well, the rope was behind the stick. Then he just went around and round and round, and he had his mouth tied closed with this stick in his mouth behind his little fangs. And then he cut that stick off pretty short on each side, picked him up, put him in a sack, and we carried him home.
What'd you do with him?
Well, I put him in a cage, you know, keep him and feed him. Okay, the thing was scared to death, I guess, and wouldn't eat. So I kept him 2 days, I think. He never would eat nothing, so I arranged it so he could get away.
That's pretty good.
But we didn't have such good luck with a skunk. We just shot him. Let him lay there a pretty good while, and went and got him. Of course, still got to skin the rascal. Stretch the hide. That's a little bit of a smelly job to try to make 30 cents. That's about what you get for a skunk hide, 30 cents.
What in the world do they do with skunk hide?
They make coats out of them.
Oh,
Bobcat, you know, they have bobcat
Yeah.
scarf and all kind of. I've seen them coyotes, and I hate to wear a coyote in it. Dangerous.
Right. Please,
Oh, I've done a lot of trapping later on in life. Sam did too, I guess, a little bit. We'd catch a few mink along. They were a pretty good price. That's where we got our Christmas money. We could catch several mink, get their hides dried and ready to go, and ship them off to Sears and Roebuck. We get the check back just before Christmas. Got a little money for Christmas.
That's good.
But I think there's a better way to do it now.
You think of anything else, Steve?
One thing I was thinking here a while back, Dorothy's cousin, she's the one that did it, but my daddy had fished all his life. He loved to fish for those old buffalo fish. And he'd sit there, him and Uncle John both would sit there all day, dip up a box of snuff, and you know, when the buffalo bite, they just kind of suck on the bait, and the end of the pole will go up and down a little bit. Well, then they tell him, I sure got a good bite, but I missed him, you know. And Dorothy's cousin, fishing in Sam Rayburn with a rod and reel, caught a buffalo that weighed 50 pounds one morning. Went back that afternoon, she caught another one weighed 50 3/4 pounds on a rod and reel. That's over 100 pounds of fish, and 2 fish in the same day. And my daddy fished all his life, and I don't know, I guess he might have caught 50 pounds, I think. Biggest one I see, I think, was 19 pounds.
What kind of fish was the buffalo?
Oh, buffalo. They just love to catch them. It was a challenge of catching them. Like I like to fish for crappie and all that brush, and vines and briars and vines and stuff. Treetops. That's just a challenge to catch him and get him out of there, and that's what I like to do. JC and I go up there, maybe Livingston, and we fish all day around in those briars and vines and brush tops and all this stuff. We might lose one hook in a day's fishing. You have to learn how to fish in there and how to get unhung. Once in a while you'd lose one, but not very often.